Hey, welcome to episode 2 of the Handsy Comprehensive Exam Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Lindsay Oden. This is part 2 of our introductory episodes, and this time my co-host Hannah Robinson interviews me about why I'm interested in history and what I'd like to do with my life. But enough about me, let's get to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by pens. Pens allow you to write all of your deepest thoughts and transmit them through a mutually recognizable language system to other humans. Pens open up the world to your love notes, grocery lists, and passive-aggressive scribblings about neighbors taking up your parking space. Pens, for when you need everyone to know, I'm literate.
Okay, let's get started. So this is Hannah here, and today I'm interviewing Lindsay, my co-host.
The co-host.
The best co-host.
Aw, thank you.
Okay, let's just start with this fun question. I want you to talk about how we first met, me and you.
Well, let me think. Did we first meet at happy hour? Where before the semester started? Because we're in the same cohort at grad school at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where we are both pursuing our master's degrees in history.
Ugh.
So, I mean, there were numerous ways that we could have met, I think, because we're just, I mean, like I said, we're in the same cohort and we share an office.
Yeah.
So we would have met in the summer of 2013.
Yes.
Right before the semester, probably at happy hour. That's the answer I'm going with.
Okay, because I can't really remember. That's why I wanted to ask that question, because I was like, is there a first, initial meeting? It wasn't very memorable.
Yeah, whatever it was. I think we were just like, oh, we're friends now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, yeah.
Yeah, when did we become friends? I think for me, it was probably when you talked about your cats, and I'm like, I like this guy. He likes pets as much as I like pets.
Well, that makes me sad because we didn't get cats until we had been living here for 8 months.
But you had talked about your parents or your family or something.
Okay,
I don't
good.
remember specifically, but
Okay.
I could tell how much you liked animals pretty soon after.
Well, I
we
mean,
met.
it's pretty obvious how much I talk about my cats.
Yeah.
And how many Instagram photos I have of them. So obviously we were going to become fast friends. If we didn't meet at a happy hour organized by the other grad students, we met in the grad student office, which we share.
The bunker.
Yeah, the bunker. The former bathroom, now bunker.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we met.
Such an inspiring face. Fun question. I wanted to kind of ask you, what do you get really excited about? What makes you happy? Not necessarily school related or work related, but just in your life.
Well, the things that excite me are school related.
Okay, that's fine.
No,
I guess.
no. I do get excited about history because obviously that's why I'm studying it. And what excites me about it is my preoccupation with theory. Mm-hmm. And so whenever somebody engages me in a debate or discussion about theory, I get really excited and worked up. And so that really gets to me when I get to talk about Marxism or postmodernism or something like that. I get very excited. Other things that excite me, I have a lot of projects that I work on myself. I do some art. I make music. I am an aspiring writer in some ways. I've got a couple novels that I'm working on. So when I think about things that excite me, I can't give you one answer.
Yeah.
Because I really am very scattered in that way, that I have a lot of projects that I'm working on.
Yeah. Do you think that creativity is kind of an essential element for a historian?
Yes, because there's such a strong interpretive element to what we do that if you're not creative, you're not looking critically at your sources or the narrative that you're telling, things like that. So when people are writing about history, when they publish these giant books, if they're not creative, then the story is not engaging. They're not taking a critical view of their subjects. And inherently what we're doing is telling a first-person perspective story about our interpretation of history. And if you're not creative, then you're not doing a good job interpreting.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about your family too, and where you're from and how much you think that affects the person that you are today. So do you want to talk a little bit about where you're from and what your family's like?
Yeah, absolutely. I am from North Idaho. I was born and raised in Coeur d'Alene. And my family is interesting, I think, because my mom is an immigrant. She's from Australia, and her mom is an immigrant. She's from China. Oh, okay. So my grandma immigrated to Australia, where she had my mom, and then my mom and my dad, who is an American, and who was studying in Australia, and then they moved back to California, and then they moved eventually to North Idaho. And then they got divorced when I was pretty young, and I got a stepmom early, and I got a stepdad a little bit later. So I have this big extended family now.
Yeah.
Because my mom's family still lives in Australia, but my stepdad's family lives in Washington State. So I see a lot of extended family that way. And my dad's family is scattered all over the United States. I barely ever see them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really affected me too, is that I don't have much of a relationship with my grandparents, just because I think I'm living partially a kind of immigrant experience that because my mom came from so far away, I don't really have a connection to family that's very strong.
Yeah.
I think I've also been influenced a lot by their separation, because I think they competed for the affections of me and my younger brother. So I've always taken that in as part of my personality, that I'm very competitive, that I am constantly searching for positive reinforcement and rewards and prizes and things like that. So whenever I performed well, it was like I could set my parents off against each other. Like if I won a debate tournament and they both that would congratulate me, but what always meant the most was who congratulated me more heartily, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like to my 15-year-old self, I was like, oh, my mom really appreciated my accomplishments more than my dad this week. And I think that had a profound effect on me.
Yeah. No, I'm actually really interested. It's really interesting that you say you felt kind of like isolated, because my family was kind of the same way. Like my extended family didn't live anywhere near us when I was growing up. And I think for me, it kind of like internalized and strengthened like that nuclear family. But for you, it kind of seems like a different, I guess it's different because my parents were together. But I don't know. It's just, I think that, I don't know. Something that I've always been interested in is how extended family, like how important that is to growing up, and how much maybe it doesn't matter. I don't really know what
I'm totally on board because my grandparents did visit, and we did go visit my grandparents in Australia a few times, but because I think a lot of my peers were partially raised by their grandparents, either as babysitters or just because they lived near enough where they could have extra parental figures. And for me, those extra parental figures came in the form of my step-parents who, you know, with my stepmom have always had a tense relationship with, and my stepdad is a great guy, and he came a little bit later in life, so I think I was more mature and more ready to accept him as part of the family. But, you know, my brother and I always had kind of a long-lasting feud with our stepmom just because she seemed to be very mean to us. And I think if we had grandparents in the scene, we would have had other parental figures that we could, you know, gain some kind of affection from or something like that. And because they were always so distant, literally geographically distant, we just didn't have that. And I think that's something that some people experience, but that was my personal experience of it, is just, you know, I think we may have had less affection than some of my peers.
Yeah, I was always jealous growing up of people who like lived next door to their grandparents or had like scores of cousins, because my grandparents died when I was really young mostly. My grandpa and grandpa lived the longest, but my grandpa passed when I was like 18. But I never had grandmothers. Like they died when I was really young. So it was just kind of not geographically separate, but just like they weren't alive.
Well, and I think in our culture, our most affectionate people are our grandmothers. I think that's an experience that a lot of us share.
Yeah.
And that was just something a little bit absent for me. And we visited my grandma in Mexico too. My dad's mom retired to Mexico, and we visited her a couple times, and she's come and visited us a couple times. But pretty much the only interaction I've had with her is our phone calls that we make like once every couple months. And now since I've left for college, I talk to my grandma once every 6 months, you know, when I go and visit home. I think I was also affected too because my parents were divorced. They lived on different sides of town. And because they had shared custody, my brother and I would go back and forth a couple times every week. And the effect that had is we didn't form a lot of neighborhood friendships with kids. And our friends that we made at school, we were away from half the week because we just couldn't hang out with them after school because we had to be transported across town. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that's contributed a little bit. I've had trouble making friends as an adult other than people like I work with or go to school with. I don't have like outside friends. Yeah. I just don't like fraternize with people. And I think it's because during the summers, half the week, I would just spend the whole day inside because I didn't have any friends on that side of town. Yeah. And I think now I'm kind of an introverted person in a lot of ways, and I spend a lot of time on the computer or doing things that I can do by myself, like composing music, which is a solitary activity for me.
Yeah.
Or reading, another thing that I would do a lot when I was a kid, just because I was inside all day.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Well, I also, that kind of reminds me, like, when I think about why, like, I'm also pretty introverted, and it kind of makes me think about, like, city life, and, like, how city life is really, like, kind of hard to be a part of because you don't have, like, neighbors that you know, or you don't have family living nearby, like how traditionally people lived.
Right.
And it just kind of makes it hard to make, like, meaningful connections in life. I don't know what I was going with that.
No, I'm totally on board, because there are some things that you need to experience every day. And I think forming childhood friendships is based on just who do you spend the most time with. You know, neighborhood kids, it makes the most sense because they live, you know, next door or whatever. So my best friends in school, I would only see like half the week. And I was never the best friend of someone else, but they were always my best friend. And I think, you know, that might speak to my kind of psychology about that.
Yeah. So what do you do professionally?
Professionally, nothing.
Okay, fine. What do you do?
At the library in special collections, I'm a paraprofessional. That's our
Is that what
position.
we are? I don't even
That's
know
what they
that.
call us. They call us paraprofessionals, so they don't have to pay us very well. And so for a few hours a week, I work at special collections as an assistant archivist, intern, paraprofessional, where I process collections and write descriptions. And the other hat I wear is I'm a graduate student and also a graduate assistant, so I help teach classes to undergraduates.
Oh, see, I didn't even talk about that when you interviewed me because I hate it so much.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, there are definitely parts of being a graduate assistant that I love. I love the experience of teaching. I think that's probably what I will do professionally once I graduate, is be a teacher in some form, either high school or community college or something like that. I hate grading papers. I hate grading exams. I love designing activities and interacting with students and things like that. So there are certainly parts of my job that I like more than others. I mean, and that's in addition to being a full-time graduate student, taking 9 credits, which is a lot for graduate work.
Yeah. I already feel it. First week's over.
Oh, my comps. My comps are getting closer every day.
Didn't you say you have like 75 days or something?
I mean, until the end of March. And so I have more books remaining to read than I have days remaining before my exams.
Oh my God.
I
really hate the comprehensive exam. I think that's the stupidest.
I think the comprehensive exam, it's obvious why they do it.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you have to know all of this stuff, and here are the people who wrote about it. I understand that.
Yeah.
I also don't understand why we're not tested on every syllabus we've ever written.
That's what,
you know.
Yeah, that's what I think it should be. It should be a test on what we've been taught, and it's like a test on what we've been taught plus however many extra books they think you should read.
Right.
But it really should be a test on what we've been taking classes on.
The way they do the comprehensive exam for the master's students makes much more sense for the doctoral students, who have way more coursework that they have to complete before they take their exams, and they have a semester just to do comps.
Yeah.
I'm doing comps and taking 3 classes and being a graduate assistant and on the job hunt.
And in the library.
The library thing, I had to get approval to work at the library.
Yeah.
You know, I could quit the library tomorrow and my life would probably improve dramatically, because that's just a couple hours a week I get back for myself to study and all of that. But I mean, it helps pay the bills. So why would I quit? And it's good for my resume, I think. You know, if I don't get a teaching job right out of graduation, then hopefully I can work somewhere else doing archival work or building my resume, something like that.
Yeah. So what like made you decide that you wanted to pursue history at the graduate level?
Couple things. I was going to be a high school teacher and decided I didn't want to teach high school students. So in order to teach college students, I knew I would have to pursue graduate work. My initial plan was to get my PhD in history and try and be a college professor, but I don't think that's a feasible career option for most of us right now. So I think I would like to teach community college. And so when I pursue history at the graduate level, it's to those ends, to be a teacher. I think. I love research. I think I love writing,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not my primary focus. And yeah, I think that's my answer. I also decided to pursue history instead of political science because that's what my other BA is in.
Mm-hmm.
I got BAs at the University of Idaho, 2012 political science, 2013 history, and I decided to do history because I think it's an easier way to talk about the things that really interest me, which is things like my preoccupation with historical theory.
Yeah.
Now I feel bad for not asking you any of these questions.
Why? They're not that different, are they?
I don't know. I don't know.
think so.
Maybe.
So who are your biggest influences?
Well, this is going to sound really silly to all the people who know me because they know I'm a tireless Foucault apologist. And it's true. I mean, Michel Foucault is definitely my biggest influence because when I read History of Sexuality Volume 1 as an undergraduate, it completely transformed my perspective on history. And it's because he's studying things that had been previously not studied, and he's studying them in such an innovative way to break down and analyze these systems of discourses and power, completely altered how I perceive the past. And I think that probably started my preoccupation with theory because then I use that as a way, I think I use history as a way to talk about what I'm preoccupied with in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And my preoccupations in the present right now are things like the questions about narrativity. What is a narrative? What are the stories that we tell? What are myths? And things like that. And when I read Foucault, he opened my eyes to all these things that I had never thought about. And he dramatically influenced how I study history. And now, theoretically, he's very important, but I think there are a lot of shortcomings in his work. And I've been influenced by other thinkers who are critics of Foucault, like Jacques Derrida is a big one, and Roland Barthes is another. And those are the thinkers currently who are making the biggest impact on me. The one guy I come back to whenever I write a paper is Jean-Francois Lyotard, who wrote about meta-narrative. And that's what I have structured my understanding of history around, is the concept of the meta-narrative.
Okay. So I guess maybe how would you like advise somebody who doesn't really read theory, like me maybe, and how would you how would you help somebody get into that who has never really read theory before?
I would definitely recommend an introductory book by Barry. Don't remember his first name. Barry. And he wrote a book with a really lame title like Introduction to Theory.
Mm-hmm.
And in that he lays out things like psychoanalytic theory, post-structuralism, postmodernism,
Mm-hmm.
feminism, Marxism. And it's a pretty short book. You could read it in a day.
Yeah.
It's like 130 pages or something. That's the first step. The other one is to just engage with the professors who are doing work that you enjoy. Because at this level, hopefully, at this level, all of the professors are familiar with their own methodology and theory.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way that they're constructing history consciously. They know what they're writing. They understand what they're doing. So somebody at UNLV whose writing I really enjoy is Dr. Michelle Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
Her book, Smyrna's Ashes, is an excellent example of deploying theory in a really accessible way because she has a very particular theoretical mindset about the way that she covers the press and things like that. So when she's writing, she's doing so conscious of the kind of theory that she's engaging with, like Habermas, like Foucault, like Said. So reading her work and then talking to her about it afterwards is a really easy way to pick her brain about what kind of theory matters to her. And then by doing that, you can try to absorb the historians who influence you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at their theory and look at their methodology and deploy it for yourself.
So I guess kind of bouncing off of the little discussion of theory, what kind of theory do you like to use when you write about history? What's your methodological approach?
Sure. I definitely consider myself, first and foremost, to be a Marxist historian. I interpret history as a kind of clash of class and the various ideologies that are a product of the economic system that exists. Mm-hmm. So I'm an Americanist. I study American history. And when I say I study American history, I study recent American history in terms of journalism, race, and gender. Mm-hmm. And I interpret the ideologies that are produced and reinforced by journalism in terms of the class structures that built them. And I see things like gender and race and the categories that are built into them as a product of American capitalism. So first and foremost, I'm a Marxist historian, but I've also, like I said, I've been very much influenced by post-structuralism, postmodernism, and those thinkers, particularly the French thinkers like Foucault, Derrida, Lyotard, and Barthes, who have influenced me a lot. And so I attempt to pick apart things like mythology and meta-narrative and discourse, different words that these thinkers have used to mean roughly the same thing, which are these dominant cultural attitudes that structure the way we understand events. Mm-hmm. So getting back to what you said, what do I write about? I almost always write about Lyotard. I almost always come back to Foucault. I almost always come back to Barthes. And then I incorporate that into a kind of neo-Marxist framework.
Do you ever, like with theory, do you ever incorporate like sociological or anthropological theory, or do you kind of stick with those?
Sometimes, but I find that a lot of the times when I'm writing about, like this last paper I wrote about, was about how the media covered gangster rap in the early 1990s. Mm. And I was engaging with a lot of sociologists who were publishing statistics, they're writing analyses of rap lyrics and things like that. So I think I don't want to approach other fields that I'm not terribly familiar with to say, you know, to quote the experts, because I don't want to defer to expertise. I think that's pretty dangerous. Instead, what I do is interpret the sociological conclusions that they've made within a historical framework, which I think I have a much more credibility on when I talk about history rather than sociology.
Okay, this kind of is like a tangent subject. I saw a post on Reddit that was kind of starting a conversation about how journalism is kind of might or has already shifted to kind of individuals like taking up the camera and being their like the journalist. So I kind of wanted to see your take on that. I don't know if that's necessarily a question. Like what like
Well, you're thinking about things like the protests in Ferguson where people were tweeting images of the police and giving their firsthand experiences, right?
So like people are now like curating their own like information in their own like media. Like do you think that's a great thing, or what do you see? How do you see journalism going like in the future?
Well, I mean nobody is a bigger critic of the mainstream media than me. Even news outlets that I might be more inclined to agree with, like MSNBC, I critique mercilessly because of the way that their discourse really does reinforce mainstream conservative discourse. And that in this country, the division between left and right is not very large. And I think that I have to critique both the left-leaning media and the right-leaning media from an even farther left perspective. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about mainstream media and the way it's collapsing into several news corporations, that's troubling to me. But what you're talking about in terms of everybody being their own information, I think is also problematic because of the way that some perspectives garner more attention than others. Because I think through Twitter, there's a certain kind of privilege that's being exerted by those who have large audiences or that can be followed. Because I think the people who are doing the most tweeting are obviously those with access to modern technology, the wherewithal and knowledge to deploy it in certain ways. Mm-hmm. But I also look at things like the Occupy movement and how it was generally a colossal failure. And those who were participating in it, doing things like Twitter and organizing around social media and curating their own information, like you said, I don't think they had a unified voice. And so when I think about history or I think about journalism, I think about it as an overtly political act. And people achieve the most political success through unity of some form. And so this kind of proliferation of micro-narratives is problematic only in that it's not as successful at creating a unified political movement. Mm-hmm. With that being said, we are bloggers, we are podcasters, we're attempting to do our own information here and to cover things in a particular lens. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can't shit talk it too much because I'm one of them, right?
Yeah.
I have modern technology,
How do you feel about cultural criticism, and why is criticism, wait, no, just the first question?
Cultural criticism to me means a political attack on political opponents. And for me, as a leftist, as a Marxist, I think that criticism means attacking the ideologies that continue oppression. And I do this because, and why I think it's important, is because I think it's inherently liberatory. That's the ultimate goal, I think, is I might be an incrementalist, socialist, whatever, but that I think every time we use criticism, and I call back, of course, to Foucault and to Judith Butler on this issue, is that criticism is about creating the intellectual space for solutions to emerge. Because solutions cannot emerge before we attack the system that prevents us from creating something better. And, I am very much a relativist. I am very much a nihilist. The words good and better and things like that are inherently nebulous and dangerous to me. But at the same time, I have to understand that the ideologies that exist create conditions and people experience those conditions in some form. And I feel that the majority of people experience oppression at the hands of capitalism. And that's why cultural criticism, criticizing the culture, criticizing the ideology is important to me.
I know that you have written kind of papers that involve kind of looking at violence through a historical lens. And I've just been thinking about how vigilante justice has been represented on like television shows and movies, and why do you think it's so popular with American culture today?
Because I think first and foremost, people do not have faith in the government, and they do not have faith in the police to carry out what we would call justice. And so we look at things like vigilante justice and who is privileged as the vigilante, which is almost always a white man. And people, the majority of whom are white in this country, enjoy seeing it because I think it gives them a kind of power to see that somebody who looks like them is doing what they wish they could do. But I also think that there's a lot of shows on TV which privilege the police narrative. Shows like Law and Order or Justified, any number of shows which have usually white protagonists, and they are enforcing the kind of power which is reinforced by this kind of discourse about who is right and wrong. And I think that in this country, vigilante justice, it strikes a chord deep within our cultural narrative, which is to say, we don't trust the government to act for us. I think this goes all the way back to the rebellion against the British, which is to say, we don't think that the government is legitimate. We don't think that they are carrying out justice in a way that conforms to our beliefs. And we live in Nevada, which is notorious for being part of the West, which was much more violent than other parts of the country for much of its history. And that doesn't even include things like the subjugation of Native Americans. So when we think about vigilantes, I think it speaks to something deep within us, but it's also the same coin as when we privilege the police narrative, which most people also believe, to reinforce a kind of justice that is a part of our cultural narrative to hold down people that threaten systems of power. And so there is a distrust of government from the bottom, but there's an implicit belief that the government will ultimately carry out the kind of justice that the white systems of power believe in.
Cool. Did you like that question?
I did. I liked it a lot. I don't know anything about my answer, but I like the question.
I like your answer.
Okay.
It made me think about stuff. Okay, so I just have one more question, and then we'll do the lightning round.
All right.
Do you think that the things, like the popular culture things that you consume, like movies, music, TV shows, provide insight into like your personality or the kind of person that you are? Do you think they're a reflection of you?
I would answer that question in two ways. The first is obviously yes. There are some things that I enjoy. I love Futurama. We've been binge watching Futurama on Netflix because it is a really biting satire of things like technology and science and our culture. And I love that about Futurama. The other answer I would give is to say that everything I consume is an incredibly interesting cultural artifact, and in that way, it is a target of criticism. And so when I watch something, even something that I like The Daily Show, for example, I love The Daily Show. I think Jon Stewart is right about most things. But there's other times where I'm watching The Daily Show and I can't help but criticize him because he does represent the mainstream liberal perspective. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he takes a lot of things far enough. So when I consume culture, then it's not only because I like it, but also because I find it interesting as a historian or as a critic or whatever.
Awesome. All right.
Hey, it's Lindsay here at Intermission. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at ScreaminVegan. Follow Hannah on Instagram and Twitter at hands_labyrinth. Don't forget to like the Handsy Comprehensive Exam Facebook page at facebook.com/HandsyComprehensiveExam. Email the show, handsycompexam@gmail.com. Be on the lookout for new music tracks from my music project, Disciplinary Boundaries. Visit soundcloud.com/disciplinary-boundaries. And of course, follow the Handsy Comprehensive Exam blog at handsycomprehensiveexam.com. Let's get back to the show. Lightning round?
Lightning round.
Lightning round.
Lightning round.
All right.
Are your questions the same as the ones?
They should be.
They should be, okay.
Yeah. Let's go. 1, 2, 6.
You probably know the questions
I
already?
don't.
Okay.
I don't.
You've got to memorize.
The only reason I say number 1 is because I know it's the first thing that came to mind when I was making the questions. So, okay. So I said 1, 2, 6, 10, 14, 15.
Are you doing the lost numbers?
Am I?
It's close, isn't it?
Oh, God.
I don't remember.
That would have been a really weird subconscious thing because I hate Lost, but I love it so much.
I don't want to talk about Lost.
I know. Okay, so I'm up to 6. I want 30, 22, 23, and 9.
Okay, the lightning round commences. Name your pets by order of favoriteness. That's a word.
That's easy. It's going to have to go Mary and Pippin. My 2 kittens are tied for first.
They're different pets, though.
Yeah, but they're the same.
You can only choose one.
They're the same entity because we got them together. They're brother and sister. They do everything together. I've watched them grow up together and everything. And I think about them in my mind as one thing. I always refer to them as the kittens. Mm-hmm. So they're number 1. That's no surprise to anybody. Second is Big Cat, which is, I think, widely considered to be my wife's cat. And I do love her, but she doesn't mean as much to me as these kittens who I've raised since they were very little.
Yeah. They need you more.
Lightning round.
You're flying in a plane. You're actually flying the plane in this situation.
Okay.
And you crash and get stranded on a deserted island with only one book. What book did you bring in your carry-on?
Well, first of all, I never only bring one book. I always tell myself I'm going to read them, and then I never do. Something from my comps list, obviously. Let's look at my bookshelf.
That's so sad.
I brought Richard Hofstadter, The Age of Reason. That's what's on the top of my bookshelf right now. And I haven't read it yet. I picked a book.
Did we read that in Moring's class?
We read parts of it in Moring's class, but I read only as much as I needed to answer the questions.
I have a funny anecdote. So
Please,
I had a draft comps list, and I brought it to Dr. Casas, and she's like, "Why is this Hofstadter book on here? Like, take it off right now," because she just thinks it's so stupid. And I'm like, "Well, we read it in a class in this department." So.
Well, you read books a lot of times that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
In order to not agree with them.
I just okay. I really should have questioned her why exactly she.
Yeah, I'm curious to know if she just thinks his argument isn't good, or to pick a different Hofstadter book, or to pick a different consensus historian who did it better. I don't know.
No idea. It was funny though when it happened. What if you could pick a fictional book? What would it be?
Like a book of fiction?
Yeah, like a fun book.
Every book.
I guess you like history.
Every book is a book of fiction.
Okay.
But I did just read American Vampire, which is a graphic novel written by Scott Snyder and Stephen King.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a cool take on the vampire mythology, and it takes place in the American West, and it's pretty neat.
Can I borrow that?
Yeah, it's right there on my bookshelf.
Okay, awesome.
You've already loaned me like 8 books, so we gotta have a book exchange.
Most of my graphic novels I loaned to a friend, and I still haven't gotten them back.
Well, which graphic novels are you enjoying right now?
Right now, I'm not like currently reading one. I'm in the middle of the Sandman series, which is awesome.
I've not heard that. I'm gonna give you the graphic novels that I got for Christmas. I'm gonna give you American Vampire, which is one of them, and I'm gonna give you Saga.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Oh, it's so good.
Do you like Warren Ellis?
I don't know. See, this is my problem. I don't know enough about graphic novels. I just know what I have come across and really enjoy so far. And Scott Snyder is one of them.
Yeah.
And I mean, I saw that Stephen King co-authored American Vampire, so I had to get it. And that's what turned me on to
I've been meaning to read Deadpool. I just never have.
Well, Deadpool is written by Brian Posehn, who I think is hilarious, and Jerry Duggan, who I also think is hilarious. They do an awesome podcast called Nerd Poker, and it's about Dungeons and Dragons. And I don't know if you'd like Deadpool. It's like really stupid violent, but it's funny. And he breaks the wall. He's like aware that he's a comic book character.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's great. It's very cool. All right, next question.
Okay. Lightning round. What song are you currently jamming that you can't stop listening to?
This is going to sound really lame, but it's this Palisades song called Outcasts. And it's this kind of generic sounding electronic core, rise core stuff. And I'll play a little bit of it. I'll edit it into the podcast so that people can hear. I don't know why I like it. It's one of those songs that I thought I would not like, because I generally do like electronic core, and I don't like any of Palisades' other songs that I've heard, but I really like this one for some reason, and it's got a great breakdown.
Lightning round. If you could go to a show with any 4 bands playing, who would they be and in what order would they perform?
Great question. I'm really glad.
Way to go, you.
I'm really glad I came up with that. Okay, so I Love A Day to Remember. They would close the show. I've seen them close 2 shows before. They're great. We Came as Romans. Almost said We Can Be Trees. We Came as Romans. They're amazing. I've seen them perform at the Day to Remember before. Of Mice and Men, but only if they play old stuff. And they would go second. Who would I have open the show? I think I would have Icy Stars open the show, because they're an electronic core band, and they're fantastic. I don't think they've put out an album that I've not liked. So Icy Stars, and then Of Mice and Men old stuff, We Came as Romans, and then A Day to Remember.
Lightning round. What is your favorite kind of animal, and why is it cats?
I find cats to be graceful, beautiful, powerful, adorable. I think when I look at wild animals in nature, the cats that appeal to me the most, the animals that appeal to me the most happen to be cats, and I love cheetahs. Anytime there's a nature documentary on and it has cheetahs, I have to sit down and watch the whole thing. The way that they move is incredible, and I am jealous.
Have you seen, I don't know if it was a cheetah, but it was a picture with the big box and there was a cheetah sitting in it, and it's like, all cats are the same, because they all love boxes so much.
Oh my goodness.
You would love the picture. Lightning round. What is the best kind of bear?
Black bear.
Lightning round. What's your favorite history book?
It's hard not to say History of Sexuality, Volume 1 by Foucault, because it changed my whole life. I would also say River of Dark Dreams by Walter Johnson is excellent. I also like Orientalism by Edward Said, and The German Ideology by Marx is a very clear statement of his critique of ideology, and I really enjoy reading that. Sometimes I go back just to reread it, because there's always something else that I pick up on. So I know that was not a book, that was several books, but if you have to read something to get a hold of who I am as a historian, then you should read those books first.
So is there a History of Sexuality Volume 2, or did he just number it 1 like Mel Brooks?
This is one of the saddest things in Foucault's oeuvre, is that he wrote 1, 2, and 3 and died, and then his family refuses to publish Volume 4.
Uh-oh.
And I think it's because Volume 4 was supposed to be a pretty critical look at the Catholic Church. And I think that's why they won't publish it.
Oh, that's sad.
I mean, Volume 1 is the best, and it's like probably the most clear and concise statement of his theory of history. And then volumes 2 and 3 are also interesting, but they never had the impact that volume 1 did. I own all 3, of course.
Yeah. But not 4. You're going to have to stage a mission and steal it.
Oh, God, I know. For some reason, it's never been a clear answer to me why they won't publish volume 4.
Yeah.
But I really want it. There was supposed to be 6. That was the idea, is that he would write 6, and he succumbed to his illness before he could get to all 6 of them.
Lightning round.
Who is your favorite film director?
Man, I tried to prepare myself for this question, thinking I would like to answer it.
We can do a different one.
No.
Oh, okay.
Because I have several, of course.
Okay.
I think David Fincher is fantastic. And as much as I disagree with him, Christopher Nolan has also, he's produced some incredible art. When I watch either, The Dark Knight or Inception or Following, I just watched Following for the first time the other day. I think I understand what he's trying to do. And even though politically he's anathema to me, his movies I think I can appropriate for more of my political goals. So those are the two I think that strike me. Like when I think about directors, those are the first two that I come up with. David Fincher, of course, did my second favorite movie, which is Fight Club.
What's your first favorite?
The Matrix. But
awesome.
I don't think the Wachowskis I don't think they've ever done anything else that I've liked. So I can't say them.
Yeah.
Lightning round.
If you could fight any person from history, who would you fight?
I think I would fight J. Edgar Hoover. Because his career was so long, and the people that he orchestrated investigations on, including people like Martin Luther King, I would just like to get in a room and duke it out, I think. That's one example. There's also a number of people who campaigned against drug legalization in the United States that I would also like to fight because of the damage they've done. Oh, I would fight Ronald Reagan. That's it. That's my answer.
Okay.
I would fight Ronald Reagan. I don't know why that wasn't the first answer. In his prime, too. I'd take him on. I wouldn't take old man Reagan. That just doesn't seem fair to me. I would take the original OP actor, jacked out of his mind, Ronald Reagan.
You'd even let him have a weapon.
He can have all the weapons. I just want my shot.
Just make the victory even sweeter.
Yeah.
Lightning round.
Okay, final question. Your iPhone breaks and you have to get a new one. What's the first app that you install?
Well, that depends. Do Facebook and Twitter come pre-installed now?
I don't know. I have an iPhone 4.
Okay, because I think I remember when I installed the newest iTunes software for my phone or whatever, I think Facebook was already an app on it. I have to say Facebook. If it's not Facebook, something else. But Facebook just because it's the way that I connect with everything. So Facebook first. If that's already installed, well, I have my phone in front of me here. What are the other apps that I find really important? Alien Blue,
Yeah,
obviously, because I'm an avid Redditor, and I am probably on Reddit at least an hour every day. So.
I had to take a break from Alien Blue for a few months. It took over my life.
Well, sometimes that's what I'm doing at the library, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm just sitting there eating lunch, I don't really feel like talking to anybody else. I'm going to be on Alien Blue.
Lightning round.
So, are we ready to close out the podcast? Is that all the questions you had for me?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, I find that this was a very fun and successful episode. Let's move to recommendations.
Oh gosh, I have to do another one.
You have to come up with another one.
Okay, I'm going to ask you first.
Okay, well, I will recommend. So in 2014, Architects completely cleaned everybody's clocks in terms of awards. So I will recommend the album Lost Forever, Lost Together by Architects.
I think I would like to recommend, I've already talked about it. I'm going to recommend Sandman. It's written by Neil Gaiman. He is kind of famous for writing Stardust. I think that's his most popular work. And it's a DC comic, and it kind of brings in a lot of ancillary characters from the DC universe into the Sandman story, which is like revolved around the character Dream. So that's all I'm going to say. It's really great.
Well, there you go. Okay, I'm going to have to get on that too.
It's awesome.
As soon as I finish all my comp
And
reading.
his sister is Death, so they like...
Oh, you know what? I've heard of this.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all for the podcast this week. Do you want to sign it off because you were in control?
Wait, how do we sign off?
Just say, have a nice day.
Okay, this is us signing off, everybody. See you later. Or hear you.
I tend to think about the worst of how